Number 1. My great-grandmother was buried in a small cemetery just a few miles away from where I lived. I convinced my 3 sons to go with me to the cemetery and attempt to locate the gravesite. That particular day was very hot, and we all wore shorts for our excursion. I took my camera along to take some snapshots of the gravesite. Shortly after arriving at the cemetery, we decided to split up. My oldest son, 15 years old, walked towards the back of the cemetery, while Matthew, 13, Adam, 10, and I started walking towards a big section of tombstones. As I walked through the rows, I got this strange feeling on my legs like I had just walked through a spider web. I brushed off my legs and continued walking. When I did locate my great-grandmother's burial site, I felt like I just walked through again. I kept brushing my legs off. Then I realized I didn't have a spider web on them at all. What I was feeling was more like an energy charge of some sort. I took 2 pictures. After a while, 2 of my sons started to load up into the van to leave. When I walked a short distance away to look around, I was walking on a dirt path and came upon a beautiful tombstone for a young college student who had recently drowned. Again, I got the strange electricity feeling on my legs. As I stood there and was reading the inscription on it, I heard running footsteps on the dirt path behind me. When I turned around, expecting to see one of my boys right behind me, there was no one. 2 boys were in the van. My oldest son was still in the back section of the cemetery when he called out to me. I walked over to him. He had this look of fear on his face. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me to look at his legs. The hair on his legs were standing up. I asked him what he was feeling, and he says it feels like electricity on his legs. As we drove home, I explained to him the running footsteps right behind me, and he proceeded to tell me about him hearing faint laughter of children. When I had the pictures developed, and after inspecting them closely, I found what appeared to be 2 faces in the picture just above the tombstone. What was even stranger was one of the faces appeared to be that of my uncle, who died when I was about 9 to 10 years old. The second face in the photo was that of a woman who wore her hair pulled back from her face. I find that really strange because, you see, my grandmother always wore her hair pulled back tightly into a bun. Number 2. I purchased a house built in the 1930s. It had originally been only 4 rooms with 3 additional rooms added on at some later date. A built-in cupboard was located in the room of the original part of the house. From the moment I moved in, that cupboard had a very musty and ancient smell. I painted it, bleached it, deodorized it, and anything else I can think of doing. The strange odor would not go away. In addition to the odor, one of the doors would not stay closed. I sanded the edge smooth, repainted it, changed the hardware, and still, every time I came in the room, the door would be opened. The room later became my infant son's bedroom. Aside from the strange odor and the open door, nothing else had ever happened until my son was about 3 years old. After bedtime one evening, he was in the room when a very frightening apparition appeared to him. I heard movement in his room and was just about to tell him to get back in the bed when he came out of his room shaking with a look of fright on his face I had never seen before. His room was very cold, even though the furnace was on, and his room was normally quite warm. He ran to me and told me there was a big black thing with glowing red eyes that had chased him around his room. His fright carried over to me, and we sat on the couch holding each other, shaking with fear. My eyes stared toward the bedroom door, just waiting for the thing to emerge, as I sat wondering what to do. I remember an aunt who had been holding spiritualism classes. I called her and told her what had just happened. From my description, she told me that the cupboard was being used by an evil spirit as a portal and it needed to be closed. She assured me that the problem would be taken care of and she would send some protection. My son and I slept fitfully on the couch that night, each of us taking comfort from each other's presence. The next day, I went into his bedroom. Even though it was light out, I still did so with a strong sense of foreboding. I walked over to the cupboard and fully opened the door that would not stay closed and was surprised to find a fresh-smelling cupboard. The odor was gone. Another surprise was the door now latched and stayed shut. Whatever had been inhabiting the cupboard was now gone. I was never quite sure what happened that night, but I know the feeling of danger and fear were very real. Number 3. When assigned to attend an electronics school in Memphis, Tennessee, I had been out on a liberty, but students couldn't have liberty during the weekend. I, having been overseas, missed such freedom, so I forged a liberty card and used an alias to be able to go off base and have a good time. This time, I had gotten drunk and in trouble with the law. They released me early in the morning without my liberty card, so I would get into trouble trying to get back on base. I was walking along a cyclone fence in desperate need of a way to get back on the base without having to go through the gate. I can remember praying for a way to be opened for me. Suddenly, there, right before my eyes, was a big hole in the fence. All I had to do was stoop down a bit and walk through it. I recall noting exactly where it was for the future reference or need. Later, when again I was out on liberty during the weekend, I had borrowed a friend's liberty card. He had a real long last name and mine is just 4 letters. I thought just in case, I would use my hole in the fence route back on the base. To my surprise, there wasn't a hole there anymore. There wasn't even a spot that looked repaired. I went to see the corner where I jogged to check and see if they replaced the fence material and repairing it. There wasn't a sign of any repair of any kind in either direction. I walked the length of a section. It could not see any new wire or repair signs whatsoever. Now I believe I walked through the material fence. How? Just like we do when dowsing. We do not know how our minds know and communicate to us what it knows when we ask the pendulum in dowsing. So, I feel on that day of great need, it somehow caused the fence or my body or both to vibrate and sync, and then allow me to see this event as a whole in the fence. Number 4. It was a few months ago, and I just moved into my new student house with a few friends. They'd all gone home for a few days because it was summer break, but I stayed there. I was home alone and it was awesome for the first day or two. Then things started to get a bit weird. For example, small things had been moved, like some of my notes or like the TV remote. I just assumed that it could have been the wind or something. The next few days, I started to hear noises in the night. Not like loud noises, more like small whispers. As if someone was in the house trying to be quiet. But I just thought it was my brain playing tricks on me. The night after that, I heard a door slam and it woke me the fuck up and I sleep like the dead. So I got up and started freaking out because the bathroom light was on and the light switch is on the inside of the bathroom. I went to try and open the door, and it was locked. And the light then turned off and the door unlocked. No one was there, but I screamed and hid under the covers for the rest of the night. I stayed up all night, then went home to my parents for a few days until the other guys came back. When I explained it to them, they called bullshit, and nothing has ever happened since. Number 5. My mother lived on a farm in Oklahoma for a few years as a child. At the time of this event, she was only 8, but much older family members have corroborated her memory of it. One night in 1950, her large family was awakened very late when they heard a loud knocking at the front door. When my grandfather answered the door, there was a young, tired-looking Native American man on the porch. He was very out of breath, and he rasped out a story about a car wreck down the road and asked if they could come to help. The young man then left, and my grandfather followed after in the car with one of his sons. They drove down the road, but never found any sign of a car wreck, so they returned home, perplexed. The next morning, there were several police cars down the same road the young man had pointed out where the supposed wreck was. A young Indian man had been shot the night before, and they found his body near the road. The face in the paper was the same as the man who had come to the door. The eerie thing was that his time of death had been long before the time they had seen him on their porch.